let's talk about something that is deeply, deeply frustrating. It's this feeling of having huge dreams, massive goals, but for some reason, you just can't seem to get started. If you've ever felt like you're trapped by your own inaction, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're about to open up the user's guide to your brain that you've probably been waiting for.
Does this whole high goals, zero action thing sound familiar? You've got the brilliant idea, right? The life-changing project, a super clear vision for what you want. But then, when it's actually time to do the work, you find yourself scrolling on your phone, taking a nap, organizing your spice rack, literally anything else. You are so not alone in this. It's an incredibly common and, yeah, painful experience.
So here's the most important thing I want you to hear today. You are not lazy. What you're going through isn't some kind of character flaw. It's actually an invisible war going on inside your own mind. It's a battle between your modern ambition and some really, really old survival programming.
And get this, science actually has a name for it. It's called the intention-behavior gap. It's the official, fancy term for that maddening space between what you fully intend to do and what you actually end up doing. And honestly, just giving it a name is a huge first step, because it changes the question from, what is wrong with me, to, okay, what's going on here?
Okay, first up, let's really dive into this paradox. Because it's not just about not getting things done, it comes with a very real psychological price tag.
Yeah, this gap, it's not harmless. Every single time you don't act on something you plan to, it chips away at your belief in yourself. That's what scientists call the erosion of self-efficacy. It also creates this constant, low-grade hum of anxiety in the background, about all the things you should be doing. And then, eventually, that label you start to give yourself, I'm just lazy, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And here is why you feel so exhausted all the time. Your brain isn't just turned off. It's in this bizarre state of active inactivity. It's furiously planning and worrying and running simulations. It's burning through metabolic energy just like you were actually working, but with absolutely nothing to show for it. You're just revving the engine in neutral, and it's draining your tank.
So let's go a little deeper. To really truly understand this paralysis, we have to look under the hood at the neurobiology. Because this isn't just some personality quirk. It is a literal battle for resources happening inside your skull.
So let's meet the main characters in this war. Think of them like a committee in your head. First, you've got the prefrontal cortex. That's your ambitious CEO, the one setting all the long-term goals. Then you have the limbic system, which is kind of like the impulsive intern who just wants a donut right now. Then there's the ACC, the skeptical accountant, calculating every single cost. And finally, the amygdala, the super anxious security guard who sees threats around every corner.
The main event, the central conflict, is really between your modern planning brain, that's the PFC, and your ancient survival brain, the limbic system. Your PFC is all logical and future-focused, but you got to remember, it's kind of like the new software update. The limbic system, on the other hand, is ancient, it's powerful, and it's hardwired to care about one thing above all else: immediate comfort and safety, not some abstract goal in the future.
And this right here is the punchline. For almost all of human history, saving energy was a top survival strategy. So your so-called laziness, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's your brain's ancient energy-saving program running perfectly, telling you not to waste precious calories on some big project that doesn't offer immediate food or safety or pleasure. Let's zoom in on that accountant, the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. Think of it like this. Before you do anything, the ACC does a super quick cost-benefit analysis. If the perceived effort of a task seems way too high for the immediate reward, it just slams on the brakes, vetoes the action. So your ambition wants to go, but your brain's accountant is screaming, the price is too high. Okay, so that's the brain's hardware. Now let's talk about the psychological software that runs on top of it. This is where things like fear, perfectionism, and some seriously faulty mental math come into play. Now, don't let the formula scare you, but this is basically the secret code for procrastination. It's called temporal motivation theory, and it perfectly explains the problem. Your motivation equals how much you value something and how much you expect to succeed, divided by how impulsive you are and the delay until you actually get the reward.
So the really important part of that equation is on the bottom. You can have the biggest ambition in the world, a huge value, but if the goal is far away, a long delay, and you're pretty impulsive, the math itself guarantees your motivation is going to plummet towards zero. See? It's not a character flaw, it's just an equation. But for a lot of us, this isn't even really about laziness. It's actually a very clever defense mechanism called self-handicapping. Procrastination becomes a shield. It gives you a pre-made excuse if you fail, and that protects your ego from a much more painful thought. I tried my absolute best, and I still wasn't good enough.
I mean, look at this logic. If you truly believe your performance is who you are, then every big task feels like an existential threat. So your brain, trying to protect you, chooses the safest path. By procrastinating, it makes sure that if you fail, you can always blame the circumstances, not your own ability. It's a tragically brilliant strategy for self-preservation.
And this whole pattern often starts way back in childhood. You know, the gifted kid who just sailed through school without ever really trying? They learn a really dangerous lesson. That having to try, having to put in effort, is for people who aren't smart. So later in life, when they finally face a real challenge, the simple act of trying feels like a personal failure, and that triggers this whole cycle of avoidance.
Okay, that's a lot of diagnosis. The good news is, once you actually understand the system, you can start to work with it instead of constantly fighting against it. So let's look at some real, evidence-based strategies to finally close that intention behavior gap.
Forget just thinking positive. This is the WHOOP method, and it's scientifically proven to work. First, state your wish. Then, visualize the best outcome. But then, and this is the absolute key, you have to identify the #1 obstacle that's going to get in your way. And finally, you make a plan. If this obstacle happens, then I will do this specific thing. You're basically pre-programming your brain to handle the hard parts.
And here's a beautifully simple hack for your brain's accountant, the ACC. It's just called the 5-minute rule. See, your ACC will totally veto write a 10-page paper because the effort cost feels enormous. But it will almost always approve just write for 5 minutes because the cost is tiny. The magic here is that starting is always the hardest part. Once you're actually in motion, you'll be surprised how often you just keep going.
And let's try to reframe this whole thing one last time. Even Leonardo da Vinci was a famous procrastinator. He understood that those periods where it looks like you're doing nothing are often when your mind is most active, when it's incubating the next big idea. So maybe your lazy time isn't so lazy after all.
So, this is the big paradigm shift we're aiming for. It's about moving away from all that self-blame and moralizing and moving towards strategic thinking. So instead of, I'm lazy, you can think, my brain's cost calculator is just being a little overcautious right now. It completely transforms the problem from a moral failing into more of an engineering challenge. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. What if your real, greatest ambition isn't just about achieving that one goal, but about learning how to finally work with that beautiful, flawed, ancient operating system in your head to become its partner instead of its enemy?